Alright, so this is my PowerPoint. Aiding post-traumatic stress disorder, um, which will go over the different topics of what causes post-traumatic stress disorder and how it leads to conflicts, right, and how those conflicts can be resolved. So if we go to the next slide, I set a table of contents with the objective of the training in relation to the target audience. In this case, it would be soldiers, mostly towards war veterans, the impact of war on society and people, involved parties in the war that benefit or have something to gain, conflict styles that can arrive with PTSD, conception and innovative activities to members whom fall under the spectrum of PTSD, and resolution to the conflict that involves PTSD. And so this table of contents basically will be covering those topics, right, in each section of the PowerPoint, and I'll be explaining those thoroughly, right, which go over for many that don't know what PTSD stands for. PTSD is an acronym for post-traumatic stress disorder, which is something you encounter in when you're in a situation when there's a lot of trauma involved and you've seen something or experienced something, right? A traumatic experience that has affected you in a number of ways. Right? So if I go to the next slide, here I explain the causes of PTSD, right? So PTSD, as I said, stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's when you experience a shock or a traumatic event that has occurred right in front of you. Mostly like during wartime, there's something that many soldiers experience, right, when they're in war and they're at conflict, right, for either many reasons, right, or when they experience it could be an authoritative figure, right, so it can be like an army general, right, yelling at a soldier, right, and the soldier has, right, experienced many traumas from many tasks that he has had to do, right, during his experience, right, abroad, or and fighting, right, another country. And so many of these events, right, can lead to trauma, right, or if you lose a companion in war, right, it could be it could cause PTSD, which you live that event causes trauma, right, and you experience a lot of psychological. It has a huge psychological impact on the brain, right, of the individual that experiences this, and it can lead to, right, mood changes, right. So there are many symptoms. These are just some of the symptoms that I've listed here, right. You experience reminders, or like you relive the event, right. You might have trouble sleeping. You could have different moods. You're always very like on guard, right. So you're always like waiting or paying attention to see if something happens to you, and this leads to many conflicts, not only in the individual's life, but also in the life of the world itself, right? How we deal with war. Uh, and so these are some of the symptoms that you encounter with PTSD. For the next slide, I list some of the conflict causes, right? So two of them, right? So the idea of scarcity basically leads to conflicts of war. So it's like a chain reaction, I would say, right? Because when two countries fight during a war, they can fight for many resources, right? Whether it be resources such as water, food, or power could be another one, right? To take control over another country, and and the generals or the commanders of these army, right? They put a lot of pressure on like their soldiers, and so that can lead to PTSD, right? And so these are conflicts that countries have, but they also lead to conflicts in the individual that inherits PTSD, because you end up having undergoing traumatic events, and it's harder to live a much healthier lifestyle, leaving this untreated. So therefore, many soldiers, right, you would seek treatment for this, and basically one of the conflicts it leads to is basically scarcity, which is a big one, and also you have the authoritative figure, right, which is another conflict, which is when somebody's in an authoritative position, right, and so these lead to issues, right, both psychological and in real world cases. So this is a famous quote by Army psychologist Berg, which says, we're not allowed to speak of the unseen wounds of war. We were not allowed to prepare for them," which Basically, what she's saying is that when you go into war, you don't know what to expect, right? You can experience such a traumatic event that it could leave a footprint on you, and you never forget that moment, right? It's you have memories, and there are certain things that you don't forget, and so that kind of leads a mark on you, and so it's hard to get past that for many veterans, right, that served in the Vietnam War. Um, and so this PowerPoint slash brochure aims to basically spread awareness of that, and basically illustrate a little bit more about the conflicts and issues that go on in day-to-day life. And so the next one would be combating PTSD, which right, there's different ways to combat this, right, when this happens. If you encounter many conflicts, which is like challenge your sense of helplessness, which means, right, to basically become aware that this is an issue, and go out and seek help. Get moving basically means to do exercise, right? Exercise tends to lower your adrenaline, right, when you have PTSD, and it tends to better the individual in the long run. Reach out to others for support, mostly like look for a support group, people that you can talk to about this, or seek treatment, right, and therapy, which really helps a lot of like people that experience PTSD. Therapy and treatment is a big one when talking about this. So these are some of the percentages, right? So it says about 11 out of every 100 veterans, or between 11%, have served in OFI or OEF, right? PTSD in the Gulf War have gained this, right? So these basically go over statistics, right? So these are some of the statistics that basically go over the Vietnam War and the things, what people have experienced PTSD and what it has led to, right? In one case, PTSD could end up being so traumatic for an individual, right? And leave a huge mark on them that, and it's not one person experiencing this, but there are many people experiencing PTSD over the years, right? And so these are some of the percentages presented, right? And so in the next slide, I go over the impacts of war, which are impacts of this huge conflict that deals with PTSD, right? So impacts of war lead to PTSD, and some of the impacts of war would be environmental, social, and economic resources, right? And these create impacts abroad, and this is many soldiers that experience PTSD fight for these reasons, right? So many countries have conflicts because of them. And then countries involved in the Vietnam War would be like, these are some of the countries that were involved, right, during that time. So the Vietnam War would be an example I would be illustrating in this case, right? And then, so one of the things to do is to really stay informed about these things. And I feel like a resolution, mostly to this conflict, is to have peaceful negotiations, right? So this goes back to how you handle conflict, not only with your superiors, but when you are engaging in war and fighting amongst another country, right? Really, how you handle conflicts really impacts that. And so mostly the conflict here could be for scarcity, and there are many reasons for conflict, and how you solve those conflicts is by going to peaceful negotiations or reaching a compromise. So staying informed is always a good way to help resolve conflicts, and stay informed, right, and keep up to date. So these are some of the resources I used, some of my websites, right? So where I got each of my resources, these state statistics, and they go over right, more about PTSD and how you could seek help, and they're very useful. So they mostly cover that, right? And go over how you can seek treatment and help someone else, right, in the long run if they suffer from PTSD or have that problem. So pretty much this is mostly what I wanted to cover, right? And mostly be able to show you how you can reach a understanding, right, of PTSD and how it can impact more than one individual, right, in the long run. So I basically covered that, and I basically went over the various points, right, that we had to cover. So mostly that'll be all. Thank you for seeing this PowerPoint. So this is more like a brochure, for individuals who have experienced PTSD and how they can handle that conflict, right, and try to reach a resolution. This PowerPoint will help you with that and help you get past that. Thank you. So, help you out.